Hi there everyone! In this video, we'll be focusing on Core Competency 3, Producing Traditional Cleanup Key Drawings, which is a part of the course audit for Animation NC2. In this video, we'll be talking about a short introduction of what cleanup is, what a rough drawing may look like, steps on analyzing and redrawing, the cleanup proper with its materials and techniques, and on how to label and finish. With that, let's get to it. First of all, we need to define what cleanup is. This is the process in the animation production stage where the final line for the rough drawing is created. The purpose of this is to give the impression that the animation was done by a single person with a unified design, despite being created by a company. The person who is responsible of doing so is called the cleanup artist. This artist may do cleanup for either key drawings or keyframes, which are the main frames of an action, or for in-betweens, the intermediate frames between two keyframes. However, for this lesson, we'll be focusing on key drawings only. To start off, we have two scenarios of how the rough drawings or render would look like. The style would depend on the senior animator who did the rough drawings, the complexity of the pose and model, and even the amount of work they have to do. On the left, we have something we call the clean render. This is the ideal type of render a cleanup artist would want to see because it almost looks like a cleanup. The lines to be cleaned up are minimal and well-defined, and any basic shapes, guidelines, and other unnecessary lines are either lightly drawn or erased. The drawing is also on model, and all of the details are drawn. The pose and facial expression is also clear. However, this is not commonly seen, and you see this in very rare circumstances. On the right is the messy render, the one you typically see. There are multiple muddied lines with no differences on the darkness of the lines, and no lines are erased. This makes it very difficult to ascertain the necessary from the unnecessary lines. Moreover, most of the character is not drawn. It mostly comprises of the basic shapes necessary to show the important action and facial expression more or less. It is also mostly drawn off model. So to properly do cleanup on this type of render, we have to look into the general steps we have to undertake. First is preparation, which is analyzing and correcting any mistakes from the rough drawing. Second is the cleanup proper, which is the actual process of creating the final line. And the last step is finalizing, which is labeling, double-checking, and submitting the cleanup to appropriate personnel. To further explain these steps, let's dissect them one by one. It's a given that you have to be familiar with the story through the storyboard. It's best to take extra attention to know the scenes that happen before and after the scene assigned. Once you receive your animation or scene folder, check the layout and field guide to match the scene with the background and estimate the size of the drawings on the scene. It is also a given that you should know how to draw the character. Practice the modeling with the given model sheet. Ascertain the proper proportions and basic shapes used to draw the characters. Also, be aware of how the feel that the character is emanating to know its personality is also recommended. To practice, use separate sheets even before receiving the frames. Should you have them, you can focus on practicing on redrawing them. Once you receive the rough drawings, you have to analyze it properly to make sure that the cleanup is done ideally and properly. Here are the types of analyses you can do. Check the overall key drawings and their motion through flipping or rolling. Flipping and rolling is a way for you to check the motion without using a line tester. Flipping is a way for beginners and can be used for cleanup. To do this, arrange the frames where the first frame is at the bottom, while the last one is at the top. Hold the papers tightly at the top to prevent slipping with one hand, and use the other hand to run your thumb from the bottom going to the top. Rolling is the technique the professionals use. To do this, arrange the frames where the first frame is at the top, while the last one is at the bottom. Hold the papers at the bottom or side with your non-dominant hand. For 3 drawings, leave your pinky finger free. Place the last page between your ring and middle finger, the middle page between your index and middle finger, and the top page between your thumb and index finger. Lift the papers using your fingers, one after the other, and not at the same time. Try to do this slowly until you get the hang of it. Check if the action follows the timing chart and breakdowns. See if there are any special instructions from the senior animator that must be incorporated. Check the clarity and integrity of the pose through kinematics and inverse kinematics involved. Kinematics focuses on the movements of humans and their limitations, like how one's neck can move forwards, backwards, sidewards, and rotate, but cannot extend. Inverse kinematics focuses on how moving a body part affects others. Like when you raise your hand, it's best to bend your elbow, then wrist to help facilitate it. Further, check if the proper facial elements are manipulated for a certain facial expression, and check the overall impact of the pose and facial expression. Check the character modeling, such as the layouting, overall height of the character, proportions based on the head and overall height, basic shapes and details. They have to be properly sized and detailed. Lastly, check the pose and facial expression based from the character's personality and the feel or emotion the character is emanating. For example, if a character is considered cool, then the facial expressions may not be exaggerated. Before doing any actual redrawing, please consult your senior animator if possible. In some cases, there are some corrections you've done that may not be approved by the senior animator. For the pencil, it's best to use a non-photo pencil or colored pencil because you can use the same paper for doing cleanup. You may also use a lighter pencil like an H grade. However, not all colored pencils are created equal. For this, it's best to use lighter tones, so colors like red and purple are not recommended. Use a colored pencil that has a different shade or color to the one the senior animator used. Turn to your drawing and erase any lines you deem are unnecessary. This can minimize confusion, especially for the lines that are overlapping, and to help you visualize the pose easier. If necessary, lightly erase over the entire drawing using the side of your eraser. Redraw the main action first based on the line of action. Visualize where the line of action is and make sure that the action is following that. Adjust any primary or secondary actions like limbs and clothing. Then, turn your attention towards the face and check its expression to make sure that it emanates character personality, feel, and emotion. Afterwards, redraw the character based on the character's proportions, volume, and other details. At this point, you will be mostly drawing details that are not present in the original drawing. Take note still of the integrity of the pose and the facial expression. When you are satisfied with your drawing, lightly erase over the entire drawing to make sure that the render will not be seen as much as possible when scanned. For the actual cleanup, one may use a separate sheet of paper or the same paper, provided that a non-photo pencil is used. Professionally, we use an animation paper with peg holes tailored to the light box. Since that is hard to acquire, for this lesson, it's best to use normal bond paper, which will be secured in the light box through the use of masking tape. The use of the light box is ideal, especially when doing cleanup where the rough drawing and cleanup is separate. But when using the same paper for rendering and cleanup, there is actually no need. What is necessary is that it stays in place. Use masking tape to adhere it to the surface. You can also attach it to a board to make it easier to turn. As for the pencil, you may use a graphite pencil, clutch pencil, or mechanical pencil. Using a clutch or mechanical pencil is easier, as there is no need for resharpening, provided you hold it in the correct way. For graphite pencil, it must be sharpened after drawing 3 lines. To save resources, use a cutter and sharpen the graphite only and not the wood. The pencils have to draw as if it is around 0.5 millimeters thick with a 2B grade pencil darkness. When holding the pencil, the grip must be placed around an inch away from the pencil tip to prevent too much pressure. The pencil tip must have a consistent angle to the paper. If possible, hold the pencil entirely perpendicular to the paper so that it would maintain the same thickness for the entire duration. Holding it at an angle would thicken the point and may need resharpening more often or replacement. There is the debate of the standard for line quality. Traditionally, cleanup is described as a thin, dark, and consistent line. This is seen in Disney's early full-length feature films, but is also seen in a lot of modern ones. This style of cleanup is what's considered as the standard in the industry. However, with the emergence of new animation studios at the end of World War II, we tend to see cleanup styles that derive away from the original. Some cleanup styles have varying line thickness, or can be inconsistent and messy altogether. At the end of the day, it depends on the stylistic choices of the animation director and client on what they wish to give to their audience. For the purposes of this lesson, however, we will be sticking to the traditional means. Going back to the actual cleanup, it is best to draw the longest lines first, and then move to the shorter ones, as this is to preserve energy to the more difficult lines for a better quality output. Further, lines must be drawn in one stroke to prevent from going over, thus preventing overlapping lines. A consistent, almost rhythmic speed must be observed to prevent wriggly lines. When drawing lines that are not intersecting, it is best to feather them out to give them a more interesting depth. This technique can also be used to drawing long lines that cannot be achieved in one single stroke. Feather the end of the first line, and then feather the start of the second line to create the illusion of a long, consistent line. Take note that the lines must also be consistent in terms of darkness and thickness. The lines have to be stable regardless if drawing straight or curved lines. No extra or overlapping lines must be seen when drawing over lines or corners. No opening lines must also be seen when drawing over lines or corners. When doing cleanup on a separate paper, it is necessary to write the information from the rough drawings. Here are the following that you may need to add. First is the timing grids and breakdown labels. It must clearly indicate if the action is in favors or thirds, written on the upper right corner. Write the frame number at the upper left corner, and if it is a keyframe, it must be encircled. Other information that can be placed are animator or special instructions. These are littered around the frame, and these may include separation parts, mouth or lip sync, breakdown cycles in timing, shadow or highlight indications, shading instructions, eye blinks or movement, or head turns. Another type of information is the production information, placed on the lower left corner. This would indicate the production episode, production title, scene number, and other registration instructions. After cleanup, all items must be organized and bundled neatly into the animation or scene folder. It usually includes the following: storyboard, layout and field guide, exposure sheets, model sheets, rough key drawings, and a separate sheet for cleanup key drawings if possible. The scene folder must now be submitted to appropriate personnel. This may be the production assistant, someone under the production manager whose job it is to accept submissions and do initial checking in a large studio, mostly for episodic productions. Another may be the production manager, who is responsible for accepting, checking, and managing submissions. A department head also takes the same role as a production manager, but a smaller amount of people assigned to departments. This is usually seen for large studios with a lot of working parts, seen when animating movies. The animation director oversees all managers and heads and may also take jobs from them if the studio is a bit smaller. For test the trainings, these are fulfilled by the supervisor or trainer. That ends the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please comment under this video or consult us through our social media on Facebook and through the created network of group chats. Stay safe, everyone!